Hi, BT has had a relationship with Nationwide spanning back over the last 10 years, under which we've provided a range of managed network and security services. The network services that we've provided have given high availability, 5 nines availability. We've introduced a continuous service improvement program that has seen in the year ending 2015, I saw the other day, there were 43 major incidents, so P1 incidents, service affecting incidents on the network. Last year there was one, so year ending April 2019 there was one. And that's been because of the investments we've made in people, in processes, in management tooling, and also in the actual core network infrastructure to provide the stability that enables us to eliminate a lot of the P1 incidents that we used to get. So services has been dramatically improved over that time and continues to be so. And then we provide a wrapper, if you like, of managed network services, which enable you to have the confidence that your users are protected, your customers are protected, and the data that traverses your network is also protected. And that gives you the assurance that the network is always going to be there, is going to be available, it's going to have the availability, the performance, and the security to enable your business to operate in the way that you need it to do so. But things are changing. Things are changing very quickly at the moment, and there's a huge drive and push to adopt a much more agile approach to change and introduction of new services. And a lot of that's driven by an agenda, and know that the Nationwide board has been pushing a number of digital transformation initiatives. Your board recently announced that they were going to invest an additional £150 million a year on top of the £550 million run rate, additional £150 million a year for the next 5 years into digital transformation initiatives. The other aspect is user expectations, both in terms of customers and employees. Customers looking for new ways of accessing banking services, whether it's through apps or internet banking applications, and also users have much higher expectations. They expect to be able to access applications they want to use to collaborate and to do their jobs effectively, but also have high expectations in terms of the user experience. And then finally, you've got big architectural changes in place, particularly where it comes to things like cloud services, so adoption and consumption of cloud technologies and cloud services. And so it's our job as your and our role as your network partner to have an honest conversation with you about what's going on in the market and your whole digital transformation journey, the way that you need to change your infrastructure. And it's not easy. There's a whole range of complexities, and much of it, starts off with timing. You've got to make sure that you get the timing of the introduction of new technologies, and the big part of that is looking at these things end to end. Your network's divided into a number of towers, whether it's your data center environment, your corporate data network, your WAN, or your edge devices and your access services. And so the sequencing of what you do when, and introducing new technologies into those environments in isolation in some cases, but also with a view as to how that fits with an end-to-end strategy and an end-to-end evolutionary path, an end-to-end roadmap. Because if you don't get the timing right, then it can cause huge disruption. If you take a piecemeal approach to these things, then you can end up with over fragmentation. You can end up with people finger pointing because different people control different parts of that environment. You can end up with service gaps in terms of the way that the network is controlled and managed, and how problems are managed and outages are managed end to end. And also you've got different issues around expertise and how you make sure that you've got access to the right SMEs to manage the different technologies that sit in the different parts and different components of that environment. And then this can lead to, again, into huge spikes in costs that customers haven't been expecting. And we've worked with a couple of organisations that have moved, been taken on by the hype or taken in by the hype. They've invested in new internet underlay technologies and found that whilst the network operating costs may reduce marginally, they've ended up increasing their spend on security fivefold in some cases, in trying to secure the gaps and vulnerabilities created through the introduction of those internet-based technologies. So you can come to a point where organisations start to think, you know what, we either work with a trusted partner like BT, we've got the assurance of the availability, the service quality, security, or we go with a different provider who can perhaps help us work and implement some of that plan, some of that transformation journey in a more agile way. But it doesn't need to be that way. BT has been investing now in our network infrastructure, in our network platforms, in our management tooling, in our management platforms, and in our processes and people for some time now, which gives us the ability to offer you the assurance that you get from the approach we take and the investments we make to provide high availability, service management and security, but also move at a much faster pace. So what's the approach that we would take? So the first thing we do is work with you to identify what your business priorities are. So what are the business outcomes you're trying to deliver? All of this investment, at the end of the day, the network is there to support the business. It has to be about delivering outcomes. So we'll look at how you are forming an end-to-end network strategy, an architectural strategy. We'll then look at how you then start implementing that transformation. This isn't about one-time isolated individual deployments of technology. It's about having a roadmap. It's about having priorities within that roadmap. It's about making sure that you do get the most from the investments you make in the short term, whilst having an eye on where you're going long term, to make sure that the investments you make now are not sort of fire and forget. They're not throwaway investments. They support the evolutionary path that we have jointly decided to take. And then it's a case of iterating. So it's an iterative process, a cyclical process. Identify where the priorities are, transform, then re-look at where you are then, what the new priorities are, how that fits with your roadmap, transform, and so the process goes on. And this is a cycle that you need to keep going back around to make sure that you're investing in the right things and you've got an infrastructure there that will support your business. So by taking your relationship forward with BT to the next level, we can make sure that and help you deliver the agility you need at pace, focused on outcomes and not the hype. Making changes or making demands for digital transformation, and organisational transformation, user expectations and architectural change, whilst also having the assurance of our availability, security and expertise. We call this approach dynamic network services. So what we'd like to do next is to have a conversation with you to understand where your priorities are, what your roadmap looks like, what kind of plans you've been forming, who you've been talking to, what are the key problems that you've uncovered or that you're looking at, where the priorities sit. Again, it's about that end-to-end view. It's about understanding what the roadmap is, ultimately where your end game is, where your end state is, but understanding the logical and the sensible investments to take and the priority, the sequencing of that transformation through from where we are today to where you want to be in the future. And it'll be, useful to understand who else you're talking to, what they're telling you, to start helping you to cut through some of the hype. And also to discuss, ways in which we can bring some of this to life. We can give you exposure to some of this technology. We can do, limited trials, proof of concepts, that kind of stuff. And so start to understand, what your risk appetite is and how quickly we need to move. And I'll go back to it one last time. What the best sequencing of investment will be in the coming months and years. Thanks very much for your time.